And I'm going to go recording now. Okay, so my name is May, and I will be the staff assistant for this room. And before we begin, I just want to have some things to keep in mind. Each of our speakers are going to present briefly, and then we'll open up the conversation to you all. And when we open up the conversation, feel free to turn your cameras on and your microphones on to ask your question. You can also use the chat function. And this is a conversation, so we encourage you to speak directly with these amazing speakers. And when you're not speaking, just make sure to stay on mute so that everyone can hear. And then lastly, we want to give all speakers enough time to speak. And so I'm so excited to introduce our breakout room speakers today. So today we are joined by first Candice Cho. And Candice Cho is the Managing Director of Policy and Counsel at the AAPI Equity Alliance, where she leads the development of people-centered database policy for the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate. Candice has degrees from Harvard College, Georgetown's McCourt School of Public Policy, and Columbia Law School, and was admitted to practice law in California and New York. She lives in Los Angeles, where she serves as a mayoral appointee on the city's Human Relations Commission, and she is the daughter of Korean immigrant parents and the first in her family to graduate from college and the first lawyer. Next, we have Megan Meadows, who works at JF Novak as an environmental attorney. She has been practicing environmental law in California for more than 15 years, recognizing the value and need for creative and sustainable solutions that benefit both the clients and the environment. And in the context of litigation and administrative matters, Ms. Meadows has worked extensively with many federal, state, and local environmental regulations, and has relished researching and advising on novel and unique questions of environmental law. Megan ran track at UNC at Chapel Hill and was featured as a subject in the 2007 documentary A Lawyer Walks in a Bar, which won the Grand Jury Prize at South by Southwest. And then lastly, we have Parjack Ghaderi, who is a LA County Counsel Chief Diversity Officer. And she is the first to be appointed to this position for the office. She is also an attorney representing the LA County Department of Beaches and Harbors, the LA Memorial Coliseum Commission, and the Regional Park and Open Space District. She has over 15 years of legal experience representing various LA County departments, special districts, and commissions, and has also served as the Chief Deputy Director of the largest social service agency in the country, the LA County Department of Public Social Services. And as a first-generation immigrant and first-generation attorney, she is passionate about encouraging traditionally underrepresented individuals to pursue careers in the legal field. And so this breakout room overall will be focusing on what it's like to pursue a career in law. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. May, do you have an order in which you would like us to speak?
Maybe just in the order that I presented you all. So maybe you first, Megan, Parjack.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Westwood staking out tables. So that's why you'll see my eyes roam from time to time. It's so nice to spend the Saturday morning together. As May said, hi, I'm Candice. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Managing Director of Policy and Counsel at AAPI Equity Alliance. We are an LA-based nonprofit. We represent the about 40 community-based organizations serving 1.5 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in LA County. I saw a table open up, so I'm going to talk and walk at the same time, like West Wing style. So we are also one of the co-founding partners of the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate. And some of you may be more familiar with that coalition. We're the leading aggregator of self-reported acts of hate against AAPIs in the country. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've received over 11,000 stories of hate. Those are hate crimes, discrimination, street harassment, bullying since the start of the pandemic. This is actually my first foray into the nonprofit world. Prior to this, I worked on the government side, and I've spent my whole career in public policy and in the public sector and public interest side. which means that I've been underpaid my entire career. And just to give you, a little bit of grounding as to why I've spent my, I think now 14 years of my career in public policy. For me, it's been very personal. I grew up not too far from here in Roland Heights, in the San Gabriel Valley, about 30 miles, 40 miles east of downtown LA. As May mentioned, I'm the oldest daughter of Korean immigrant parents. And when I was in high school, my father was self-employed, like lots of Asian immigrant and immigrant parents, which meant that he did not have health insurance. Because at the time in this country, almost everybody got their health insurance through their employer. So if you worked for yourself, it was almost impossible to buy health insurance for yourself. He was then diagnosed with cancer. And throughout the course of his illness, it was extremely hard for him to get a regular source of care. And he ended up, going to the hospital maybe twice the entire time he was ill. And then a month after he passed away, I went to college and experienced all sorts of challenges that I now know and I now can name as being connected to things like depression and grief and being a first-gen college student, being on financial aid that I did not have language for at the time. And then in college, as a freshman, I read this book about President Clinton and Hillary Clinton's attempt to pass healthcare reform and extend health insurance to 100% of the people in this country. And that book lit me on fire. It set me on my course. It taught me two things. It taught me that what I had gone through and what my family had gone through was not unique, and that there were 50 million people in the country without health insurance at the time. And it also taught me that what happened to us was not our fault, that what happened to us was the product of decision-making by people at the highest levels of government for over the course of decades. And so that's why I wanted to do policy work. I was 18 years old, and I said, I'm going to work in Congress one day on universal coverage. So since then, my career has taken me away from there. But really what's remained at the core of my work is that I've been lucky enough to be in the room when elected officials are making decisions that impact millions of people. And unfortunately, it is often the case that they're thinking about their political ambitions or job security or their next job. And they're not thinking about us in this room and our families and our communities. So that's really at the core of my work. And at some point along the way, I decided that having a JD and being a lawyer would be a valuable skill set to bring to this policy work and systems change for more just, inclusive, and equitable governments and communities. So I'm going to pause there, and I guess I will pass it on to, is it Megan next? And happy to have a conversation with everyone once all the speakers have presented.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Megan Meadows, and I'm just going to start by saying it's been so nice to hear everyone speaking so far. I can't believe how much has resonated with me and sort of validated my experiences in law school and before law school and figuring out what to do and perhaps not knowing what to do and then falling backwards into something that now makes sense. So I practice environmental law. Actually, let me go back. So I went to UNC. I knew I wanted to go to law school at that time, but I knew that I wasn't quite ready for that commitment. So I worked. I did some very random jobs, knowing, I would take the LSAT and go to law school. Ended up moving out to Los Angeles, which was not in my original plan, but I got into Loyola Law School, and I was a bit nervous about it being a private school, but the focus on social justice was really inspiring. That had always been something important to me, and it's really important to the school. So if when you're considering law schools, that's something else to think about is that they have the programs that you're interested in. If you're interested in environmental law, look for schools with, an environmental law review or, clinics. Anyway, so law school was great. I was really interested in criminal justice reform, prison reform. And then I graduated. Well, my dad passed away during law school. So I had this epiphany that, do what makes you happy. Do what is important to you. So I had one job offer. It was in medical malpractice defense. And I decided instead to do contract work. So we can talk more about that later, but if you're still sort of undecided about where you're going after you graduate law school, there are options for you to, make money, figure that out, develop your network. So I actually landed at a small law firm that focused on environmental law. And I thought, oh my gosh, this has everything that I'm looking for. It's, both litigation, but you don't have to be in a courtroom. It's always evolving. You're never going to know everything about environmental law. I mean, it's outrageously complicated, but you can, find your little niche and sort of, feel like an expert in one small area. And I thought, okay, this is great because it's not just practicing law. This is impacting people's lives. I took one environmental law class at Loyola, and it didn't really, it didn't speak to me at the time. But the point where I got this job, it really, something just, made sense that this is a career that you can grow in. It's a career that, finally is focusing on environmental justice issues. And so that was really important to me. So I now work at another small firm. So similarly, I'm not making the big bucks, but that's okay. I don't think a lot of people do make those $250,000, annual salaries with $80,000 bonuses. I mean, those jobs are out there, but so anyway, sorry. So currently what we do is we do represent defense, we do defense work. So we are representing people who have violated the law. However, we don't represent big oil. We don't represent people who have, violated the law on purpose. We represent people who, are under this huge regulatory system. And it's honestly probably impossible to actually not violate some environmental laws. So we want to make people better. We want to make businesses do the right thing. We also represent plaintiffs groups. So we represent nonprofits who do sue the bad guys. So the work is really varied and quite interesting. No 2 days are the same. And I would love to, talk with you guys now, later. Happy to, if I can't answer any questions at some point, my philosophy is I will find someone who can. So with that, I will pass along the mic.
Good morning. My name is Parjack Ghaderi, and welcome to you all. You are all so much far ahead of where I was in my career. So I just wanted to chat with you that when I went to college, I actually thought there was only 3 careers you could have. I thought you could be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. I thought those were the only options. I took a bio class and decided, no, that is not for me. I knew engineering. I didn't even understand what engineering was. So I defaulted into the, the path of law school. So you all choosing that is so much is wonderful that you are so far ahead on your career journey. So I applaud you, and I hope you take a moment to appreciate just that you are, you are already thinking about your careers, and that you joined this breakout group because it kind of sets you up. And what I really want to share with you is that as long as you do what the city attorney said, put one foot in front of the other, you will end up where you are going to be, and it will be as it should be. So I want to give you that. I didn't really know anything about being a lawyer, except what I saw on TV. And for my first few years of practice, I was doing business litigation. And again, I fell into that because I joined a firm that my friend had started. And so every time I went to court, I would be sick to my stomach and I would be nervous. And at that time, even though it wasn't that long ago, I was the only woman in the room, still wearing pantyhose, if you believe believe that. And I would get to court early because I knew I was going to be sick. And so I would go there and I'd be sick and I'd be like, and make it through, and you survived. And I remember talking to someone early on saying, I don't think law is for me. I don't think this is good. I want out. This is this is not good. I feel sick all the time. I'm nervous all the time. And he gave me really good advice. And that was, it's called the practice of law. So you are practicing every day. So you practice. And if you accept that you are practicing and you do not have to be perfect, and luckily there are no mistakes that you can't undo, you will be fine. So I just encourage you to stay with whatever it is and know that it is a practice. It is hard, but you show up every day and you can do it. And so, trying to do business litigation clearly was not my calling. And I applied for every job in the world. I applied to be a PD, a DA, you name it, I applied. In those days, if you have a name that you cannot pronounce, you are not going to get a call back. I got no callbacks with my resume. The only people that called me back were government agencies because they had to call me back. Because they have the obligation to call you back if you meet the minimum requirements. And so that's how I got my foot into the county counsel's office, which I think is the greatest place in the world to work. I knew the minute that I walked into the office that was going to be my home, because they let you do things as a brand new lawyer that I didn't think it was possible. I got to work on a class action lawsuit. I got to work on all kinds of crazy things that happen in the world of government. One of our elected officials calls the county as the county turns, which is a reference back to an old soap opera we used to watch as kids. But anyway, I want to encourage you all, and to take a moment to appreciate where you are and know that you don't have to have all the answers, and that it'll all come to you. Right now, half of my work is doing legal work for the Department of Beaches and Harbors, which is a fantastic department. They do so many wonderful things for the residents of LA County. The other half of my work is as the Chief Diversity Officer for our department, which I find very rewarding, because really our goal is to make opportunities and the workplace a place for everyone, and making sure that we all thrive, that we all succeed, that we all achieve the careers that we want. So it's wonderful that I get to do both. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So does anyone have any questions to start us off with? If so, just use the raise hand feature and then go ahead.
May, do you think we could go, are people going to be comfortable enough to go around the room and introduce themselves?
Oh yeah, that would be great. I think we have enough people to do that. Yeah, let's do a round robin then. Rosie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can go. I won't turn my camera on just because I'm still waking up. But are we just doing introductions or are we asking questions?
Just like a brief introduction, and then after that we can do a round robin of everyone, and then we can start off with some questions.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So for an introduction, my name is Rosie. Right now I'm getting my master's in forensic psychology, and most of the people in my program, they're looking to join the FBI or law enforcement. But after taking some courses in like advanced criminal law and legal research and reasoning, I decided I wanted to pursue law school once I finished. But I'm here today as far as in this section because I'm curious as of to other careers in law instead of being a lawyer. Just because I'm really interested in nonprofit work as well as civil rights, specifically maintaining rights for those incarcerated.
There you go. There you go. Mm-hmm.
Nikita, do you want to go next?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't I didn't know you could hear me.
Oh, no worries. I just thought that would be perfect. Round robin,
Okay.
yeah.
Hi, Nikita. I'm actually on the East Coast. Um, I am not your traditional student. I am an adult returning student to school. So I'm recently a John Jay grad with an honors and major in criminal justice, and I did a minor in public administration. I am now studying for LSAT, attempting to apply to for my JD and master's in public administration same time. Master's public administration, Juris Doctorate. Um, I am retired law enforcement. However, I re-entered the workforce working in the DA's office. So my goal is to ultimately, initially, be a prosecutor. However, once working inside the courtroom on a daily basis, seeing so much, I sort of had the same idea as Rosa of looking to help a nonprofit and trying to find my way of what else within the criminal justice system could I do with the JD. Um, could it be something like working with, I guess, like wrongful conviction, some type of pro bono service? I, I'm really not sure, but I do know that I want it to be within the realms of I'm more of a helping person, people person. Um, just a little bit about me is to make it short. I am the type that it can be even when I was on the street helping the defendant, um, try to let him, even though advising him of his right, trying to assist with other issues, like they may have family issues. So I would give them resources to help out in that way, to be trying to help out in a well-rounded way. So I do this with my JD. So I don't know what type of career path that would be, but I'm hoping that I was get some insight here.
Okay, awesome. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves? If not, we can proceed to the questions that anyone might have.
Can I introduce myself?
Yes, of course.
Hi, my name is Josue Morales. I'm originally from LA, Koreatown area, but right now I'm going to school in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm in my second year at Brown University studying urban studies at the moment. And I mean, I came in wanting to study architecture and urban studies, but I think I gravitated more towards like trying to learn about policy in within the urban sector and housing sector. And that's kind of why I've joined this call, because I'm in debate whether I want to go to law school or graduate school for urbanism um after my undergraduate career. And so I just think this opportunity is great and just want to learn more about what other careers in law there are, because I think as of right now, all the knowledge I have of law is just that they're just attorneys, and I'm sure there's many more um careers that I can learn from this call. So yeah, thank you for it.
Okay,
Hi,
awesome. So I think, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I want to also introduce myself. Hi, my name's Araya Style. I'm currently a senior in high school, probably like the youngest one here. But I want to learn more about law as well because I want to help with family matters. And I kind of want to learn more if you guys knew anything about child custody, like a mediator or evaluator, and just yeah, just want to learn more about law. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we start off with kind of elaborating on what each of you find the most rewarding as about being a lawyer, or doing whatever you do in the career of law, and kind of go on from there. Does anyone want to, maybe Candice first?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. So
Okay,
for
awesome.
me, what's most rewarding is this is going to sound super cheesy, but making a difference. I am not your typical lawyer who works in the courtroom or on contracts. I'm like in that like 5 to 10% that works on policy and legislation. So I actually used to be, for example, when I worked for New York City, I used to kind of be at the county council type of side, like writing laws. I wrote a lot of our sanctuary city laws in New York City that protected immigrant New Yorkers during the Trump administration. So what a law degree has allowed me to do is to be an expert in language. I think if there's one value add to a JD in the policymaking world, is that it just makes you super sharp about writing and being really intentional about making every word count. And then if I'm going to add more to that, I would say if you're going to end up working on policy and legislation at the local level, like in the city, at the county, or at the state level, then a law degree also helps you understand what's possible, because as a legal matter, because when I worked I started my career in the U.S. Senate, didn't have to think about any legal issues other than the US Constitution, could write anything as long as it was consistent with the US Constitution. But when I worked for New York City, I had to think about, did the city have the authority to do this under state law? Am I writing something that's consistent with the state constitution? Are there any federal laws that I have to think about? Are there any federal constitutional issues I have to think about? And that's all stuff that I learned in law school. So for me, I think the most rewarding part of being a lawyer in the policymaking space is getting to do the kind of work that ends up being a law on the books, whether it's like a sanctuary city law in New York City that limits the city's ability to hand people over to ICE, or here at Stop AAPI Hate, we passed a couple bills. We got a couple bills passed in the California state legislature that make public transit and businesses safer for example, communities of color, my community, when we're facing verbal harassment in those spaces. So that's the most rewarding to me. It makes being underpaid worth it.
Thank you for that.
For me, sorry. Never a moment alone. So for me, and I hope this doesn't sound cheesy as well. That didn't sound cheesy at all. That's the least cheesy part of being a lawyer, I think. I think I continue to be rewarded by the people that I meet in this field. It's just literally like once a week, twice a week, I meet new people, and I'm just blown away by what people have done. Today I'm now, hearing about what other people are doing, and it's just really like, it's inspiring to just, continue to meet people, whether it's in the environmental field or not, but in my field, meeting people, we do mostly water law, so Clean Water Act work, and, in California, groundwater, there's a lot going on with that. It's been stolen. The laws regarding it are antiquated and ridiculous. So, kind of learning more about that. And then, talking to people who work in energy law, that's fascinating. People who work in air law, that's really interesting. So I think, and somebody mentioned this earlier, but it really is a lifelong learning journey. Every day you're going to learn something new, and you'll probably relearn things. worked on a case 5 years ago and I probably knew, what I was working on and I could recite stuff in my sleep, I'd have to go look it up again at this point. So you're just going to have to be okay with, not knowing everything. That's what the research is for. So just as a side note, and I have to remind myself this, don't put too much pressure on yourself to, feel like you have to know it all, because you won't. But just going back, meeting new people, being inspired by new people that I meet, practicing different areas of law. It's so noisy in here, sorry. But that's what's most rewarding for me. So I'll say, to future lawyers and future defenders of justice, it's great to be in all of your company today. So.
Okay, I think that what's most rewarding for me is being able to move things forward for my client departments. I primarily advise departments. And so they come to me usually with a problem, and I get to walk them through it because I don't do litigation. I don't do litigation. So it's always trying to, how do we have this program on the beach and make sure that, we're not breaking any laws. That's what I do now. And so they come to me with a problem and I get to help them solve it. The other thing that I really enjoy about my work is that because we're the County of Los Angeles, as Dawn mentioned at the top of the hour, we are involved in everything. And so as a lawyer in that, we get to be involved on the day-to-day lives of people, which is really fantastic. And I know someone had a question about careers, and I want to just touch on that. I think the law degree, as Candice mentioned too, kind of gives you a opening to a lot of things. I was the lawyer for the Department of Public Social Services for 7 years. I was their lawyer. And so when they had a position on their executive team, they asked me to be their executive because I had gained so much knowledge on the work of social services. Being a lawyer allowed me to learn all that, and they asked me to be part of their executive team. And so I got to co-lead the department for a few years. And so I do think that your career, wherever you start, whether it's urban, as an urban planner or whatever it is, or in the criminal justice, I think you're going to have a trajectory. So where you start, it's not going to be where you necessarily end. And so that's really rewarding too, because you're not going to be doing the same thing every day. You're going to change and evolve. So it's been a pleasure to be part of this group.
Awesome. And I think you do have a question in the chat if you wanted to take a look at it.
Sure, Brianna, I'll leave you my email and you can reach out to me and we can talk offline.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so I have a question. What project are you most proud of? And I know that this is a pretty hard question because there's probably millions of projects that you've worked on, but if anything comes to mind that you want to talk about, that'd be great.
I'm happy to. The County of Los Angeles gets sued a lot. We get sued a ton. And sometimes, personally, it's hard for me because I feel like it's taxpayers getting sued. So I take some of those lawsuits personally because I'm like, oh, this is not the right way. But one of the lawsuits that we had was with a group of advocates, which we are all on the same page. We always want to serve the county, but working on a couple of those massive lawsuits, those class action lawsuits, was really rewarding because we were able to not go to court really on those, and we were able to settle those two big cases that I worked on that benefited the public and also resolved that gigantic dispute. So I was really proud of that because really we were, even though we are on the same page of serving the public, we really had to come to the middle and meet on those two things. That one of them was serving persons with mental health disabilities and one was for public assistance. So I'm very proud of those because it really took a lot of collaboration with our advocate community.
I can go with, an example. We had a Clean Water Act case that went to jury trial, which, like Parjack, I never wanted to be in a courtroom. I don't want to do depositions. Talking to people on the phone is difficult enough. So our firm is a female-owned minority firm. There's three lawyers, and our client was a nonprofit who sued a bad guy who was dumping stuff into the water. So we took it to trial. I won't belabor the procedural nightmare that followed, but what ended up happening is during that time, the Supreme Court actually ruled on, thanks again, Trump, but narrowing the definition of a water of the United States, which has really far-reaching impacts, not in a good way. So the law that we were making law with our jury trial, helping to define and keep the definition of a water of the United States as broad as possible. It's sort of a drop in the bucket, but it felt good. It felt like, we took on a corporation who really didn't care, and we held them accountable. So that always feels nice.
I know there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I see a raised hand. May, how do you want to handle this? Because I know we also have 2 minutes left.
Okay, so we do have, we do have 2 minutes left. So I would suggest that maybe chatting offline if you do have questions remaining. Why don't we go with what was the biggest obstacles you overcame? And if we somehow have any time, we can move on to the next question.
So I'm happy
we
to
can
kick
have
us off.
each of the speakers. Yeah.
So if you have any questions, I love talking to people and whether law school is the right path for them and whether lawyering is the right path. So feel free to reach out to me by email. My email's in the chat. I would say the biggest challenge for me was being the first in my family to go into law. So I didn't grow up with any lawyers. I didn't even watch Law and Order until I got to law school. And so everything for me was like I had to figure out how to do things myself. And there is not really a clear path for people who want to do policy and legislation, especially for, I went to Columbia Law School. Almost all of my peers go into a big law firm. They do make that huge amount of money. And it can be really hard to do something that feels like salmon swimming upstream without any clear examples of other people in your life to help. So I would say, like, all of you who are in this room, you're already way ahead of the curve and starting to do your homework. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure the other speakers feel the same way, as a resource, and continue having conversations with people to kind of enlarge your imagination as to what's possible. And if the law feels uncomfortable because it feels elitist, it's not you, it's the law. The law is elitist and it is uncomfortable.
Oh,
okay. So breakout rooms will close in 30 seconds.
I'll go in 15
I'm sorry
seconds.
that we weren't able to.
No, that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. So thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you back in the main room. Okay, so hi everybody again. So hello everyone, and welcome to Breakout Room 3, so Careers in Law. And so this breakout room rotation will run for about 40 minutes. So it's going to run until like maybe 12:02, I think. And so my name is May, and I'll be the staff assistant for this room. And so before we begin, just some things to keep in mind. Each of our speakers are going to present briefly, and then we'll open up the conversation. And when we do open up the conversation, feel free to turn your cameras on and your microphones on to ask your question. You can also use the chat function. And so this is a conversation, so we encourage you to just speak directly with these amazing speakers. And when you're not speaking, just please stay on mute so that everyone can hear. And lastly, we want to give all speakers enough time to speak, and we also want to make sure that your questions are answered. So I highly suggest making sure to get your questions in before we start wrapping around, like before the 5 minutes ending. And so I'm so excited to introduce our breakout room speakers today. First, we are joined by Candice Cho. Candice is the Managing Director of Policy and Counsel at AAPI Equity Alliance, where she leads the development of people-centered database policy for the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate. Candice has degrees from Harvard, Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, and Columbia Law School, and is admitted to practice law in both California and New York. And she serves as a mayoral appointee on the city's Human Relations Commission. And she is also the daughter of Korean immigrant parents and the first in her family to graduate from college and the first lawyer. Next, we have Megan Meadows, who is environmental attorney at JF Novak Law. She has been practicing environmental law in California for more than 15 years, recognizing the value and need for creative and sustainable solutions that benefit both clients and the environment. And in the context of litigation and administrative matters, Meadows has worked extensively with many federal, state, and local environmental regulations and has researched and advised on novel and unique questions of environmental law. Megan ran track at UNC Chapel Hill and was featured as a subject in the 2007 documentary, A Lawyer Walks into a Bar, which won the Grand Jury Prize at South by Southwest. And lastly, we have Parjack Ghaderi, who is the LA County Counsel Chief Diversity Officer and is the first to be appointed to this position for the office. She is also an attorney representing the LA County Department of Beaches and Harbors, LA Memorial Coliseum Commission, and the Regional Park and Open Space District. She has over 15 years of legal experience representing various LA County departments, special districts, and commissions. As a first-generation immigrant and first-generation attorney, she is passionate about encouraging traditionally underrepresented individuals to pursue careers in the legal field. And with that, I'm going to have the speakers kind of also elaborate on whatever I just said and kind of present a little bit.
Should we go in reverse order?
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's start with Parjack. Thank you.
Thanks, Candice. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Careers Breakout Room. We just had our first session, so I guess I'll kind of repeat what we said earlier. I think that you all are so far ahead on your career planning than I certainly was when I was in college or high school or law school. I didn't really know anything about being a lawyer. I ended up going to law school by default because when I was going to school, I actually thought that there was really two choices: doctor, lawyer, engineer. And after taking one biology course, I very quickly learned that my brain was not set up for biology. I really don't even know what engineers do. I think it involves math, so I definitely couldn't do that. I did my undergrad at USC, and because I'm an immigrant, international relations sounded interesting to me because I'm like, oh, I'm international. I'm going to go into international law. I don't even know what that means, but that's kind of, in my fantasy head, that's what I thought. And it was great because it talked about going into political science or international relations kind of gives you this broad macro perspective of the world, which really appealed to me as I enjoy learning. And I actually, after, I know everyone says USC has great connections. I didn't make any connections. And I ended up working as a secretary after I had a degree from USC. And so, I ended up going to law school after 3 years. And as I shared in our previous group, my name has always been kind of a challenge because if you are applying to law firms and they can't pronounce your name, they're not really going to call you for an interview. So I didn't really get any interviews applying for jobs. And the entities that did call me back were public agencies. And so when I went into the county counsel's office, and I don't know what it is, I think we have intuition. I walked into the office and I knew that this was going to be my home. And it has been a wonderful place to build a career. I have gotten to do so many things that I didn't even know you could do as a lawyer, including be part of an executive team of the social service department, including now being the office's chief diversity officer. And so I agree with everything that everyone else has said throughout the day, that having a law degree opens up a lot of doors for you. And, where you start and where your career takes you, it can look very, very different for everyone. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, as long as I think it's Mark Twain that said showing up is like 90% of getting things done. As long as you show up, you do your best every day, wherever you are, high school, college, if you just do your best and show up, you're going to get to where you are meant to be, in your, you know, in your authentic self. I'm happy to join this group and help and support you all as you are traveling your journey.
Hi, I'm Megan Meadows, and I'm so happy to be sandwiched between these two practitioners. And it's so funny, I'm just discovering similarities between our paths. And I thought, you know, medicine, doctor, that sounds great. I got a C in freshman year biology in college, and I was like, well, that's out the window. What else can I do? And I really enjoyed sociology, which then kind of led me on the path to think, all right, what can I do with sociology degree? The answer is not much if you don't want to be a professor, but it's great for law school. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, similarly, I ended up in law school thinking I was going to do one thing, and ending up not doing that, not doing anything I thought I would do, sort of landing in a contract job for 2 years while the economy tanked. And then I got a job. Actually, I got laid off because the project ended. I spent several months looking for a job, you know, getting up every morning. My job was finding a job. And I went to a small law firm that was environmental law. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. This makes so much sense. And it hadn't occurred to me while I was taking an environmental law class in law school. So yeah, your path may be in front of you. You might not recognize it. You might have 7 paths. I actually left law for a couple of years to do athletics administration. And when I did that, I decided I actually really like the law. So you can't predict what's going to happen. But I think the important part is, and you're going to hear this and you've already heard it, just continue to network and meet people, talk to people, grow your network. People are very supportive. I think one of the key takeaways from law school for me was I learned that it's okay to ask questions. I had always been afraid to ask questions and, you know, feel dumb and, you know, whatever, but law school solved that. And I have to say, asking questions was one of the best things I learned from being in law school. So take this opportunity to ask as many questions as you want. And what I say is, if I can't help, I will find someone who can. So anyway, I practice environmental law. We do mostly water work. There's energy and air, which I know nothing about, but there's a lot of different fields in environmental law. There's environmental justice careers. If you want to work for big oil, you can do that. You'll probably get a bigger paycheck, but anyway, so with that, I will pass to Candice.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on a Saturday morning when you could be doing any number of things. Hi from a coffee shop in Westwood. I'm Candice. My pronouns are she, her. As May mentioned, I lead the development of data-driven, people-centered policy changes and solutions for the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate. We're the leading aggregator of self-reported acts of hate against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders nationwide. And we've heard over 11,000 stories since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I also lead policy and civic engagement for AAPI Equity Alliance. We're an LA-based nonprofit and a coalition of over 40 community-based organizations that serve and represent the 1.5 million AAPIs in LA County. So I've spent basically the entirety of my career in policy. It's been about 14 years now, and been a lawyer for about 11 of those years. And my story of how I got involved and down this road is a very personal one for me. it started when May mentioned that I'm the daughter of immigrant parents. And like many other immigrants and Asian immigrants in particular, my dad was self-employed when I was in high school. He did not have health insurance because at that time in the country, I think even now, almost everyone got their health insurance through their employer. So if you worked for yourself, you probably didn't have health coverage because it was very expensive to buy as an individual. And he was self-employed and uninsured when he was diagnosed with cancer, which meant that for the entirety of his illness, he didn't really get the care that he needed. I think he went to the hospital maybe twice. And about the summer between high school and college, he passed away. And a month later, I left for college. I went to Harvard. It was, thank you for that very more meaningful reaction. It was really strange to be on the other side of the country. I had never been to Boston or let alone Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had to buy my first winter coat. Nobody told me about wool socks, which I discovered like 10 years later. I now know in hindsight, I was probably depressed, probably grieving, definitely grieving, experiencing all those growing pains with being a first-gen college student on financial aid. But I just didn't have like the language to name any of that. But something happened that changed my life. I took a class where I read a book by a pair of Washington Post journalists about the Clinton White House and how they tried to pass major health insurance reform that would result in universal coverage. So everybody in the country would have health insurance. And the book is all about the many ways in which they failed. And when I read that book, it was like a religious revelation for me, because I learned, number one, that what I had gone through and what my family had gone through was not unique. And that in fact, there were 50 million people in the country without health insurance at the time, going through similar struggles. And number two, I learned that none of this was our fault. And this was, in fact, the product of decision-making at the highest levels of government over decades. So I was 18 years old, and I said, I'm going to go work in Congress on universal coverage. So my career has taken me a little bit away from that. I started my policy career working for U.S. Senator Dick Durbin. I then went to law school. I worked as an attorney for the city of New York on many of the sanctuary city policies that were enacted to protect immigrant New Yorkers during the Trump administration. And now I'm on the nonprofit side for the first time. But what I've learned over the arc of my career is that, unfortunately, the people who get to make decisions that impact millions of lives are not thinking about any of us in this room and our families and our communities. They're thinking about other things like their job security or political ambitions. And so I feel very passionately about making sure that my community, that our communities are at the table. Because if you're not you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I feel very passionately about making sure that we change the rules of the game. And that's what policy work is really about. It's about understanding that there are rules out there that are part of the status quo, that they're not neutral, that they produce winners and losers, and that I want to be in that game, changing the rules so that my communities are centered. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to May.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions to start us off with? You can also type it in the chat. Oh, and I also encourage you guys to turn your videos on if possible. Yeah. Jocelyn, did you have a question or did you just turn your video? Okay, got you. Okay, so I had a
Can I ask
question.
the question? I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
May
can
I
you
ask my
go
question?
ahead? Yes, of
So
course.
when Ms. Chow, you were speaking, you said you chose the policy because you want to change the game. So how did you transition to that? How did you know, when you got your law degree, how did you transition into policy? Or was that a study you took when you were in law school?
So when I was in college, I began to understand that Congress is how you change the rules on the federal level. So the first thing I did after college was I went to grad school in DC. In hindsight, I now wish I had not done that, because I think you know, when I'm like 21, 22, those are like the freest years of my life. So I should go on a frolic. But I knew that I wanted to work in Congress and I had no connections. So I thought, okay, the best way to get connections is by going to grad school in DC. And I got a full ride from Georgetown. So it wasn't going to cost me anything. They also gave me like a living stipend. And actually that ended up working out like as planned. That's how I ended up interning for Senator Ted Kennedy. And then that's how I ended up making the kind of connections that got me into Senator Durbin's office. So I would say, like, if anyone's interested in working on policy, one really easy way to, not easy, but like the easiest way to move up, I think, is to go work for a legislative body, because whether it's Congress, California State Legislature, LA City Council, those jobs have a lot of turnover. So it tends to be easy to get your foot in the door and then move on up. Or I would say the hardest thing to do is get your foot in the door, get that first job. But once you're in, it's much easier to be networked with the right people, with the right information to be able to move up within the legislative body. And then you have a real understanding of how policymaking is actually made, as opposed to like the grad school flowcharty understanding. So then I had worked with a ton of lawyers, and weirdly, working with lawyers made me want to go to law school. I was like, wow, they have like all these gifts, like they're so exact with language. So if I want to write laws, I want to have that gift of being really precise, being a practitioner of language, an expert in language. And then when I was in law school, I knew that I wanted to go back to policy work on the government level, but I also knew I wanted to work at the local level, because in Congress, it takes forever for anything to get done. So I'm a little obsessed with New York City. So I knew I wanted to work for New York City government. And there was this one unit in the New York City Law Department, which is like the LA County Counsel. It's their LA County Counsel that works on policy and legislation. So that one unit of like 20 attorneys writes all of the city's laws. And so I got an externship through my law school at that unit. And that's how I got in the door. That's how I knew that I actually wanted to do that work. And that's how I got in through the door. So I guess the two main takeaways is, if you want to do policy work, working for a legislative body is a really good way to do it, better than grad school. And number two is, if you're in law school, definitely do something experiential, like experiential learning wise, like do an externship or an internship that puts you in an actual workplace, because there's no better substitute for knowing what it's like to do that work and whether it's a good fit for you.
Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so I was wondering, what is the most rewarding part of your job and what is the most challenging? Oh, and then Megan, did you want to go first? Do it, Lola.
Sure. Rewarding and challenging. So rewarding would be, continuing to meet people who are doing really great work and learning from them. So I think part of being a lawyer is knowing that you're not going to know everything and being okay with that. And so, we're kind of here to answer questions and be mentors in whatever way possible. And that's just sort of what you need on an ongoing basis. My boss is my mentor. I learn something from her every single day, and I've been practicing law for 15 years. So it's not humbling. It's just, it's a journey that really never ends. That sounds generic, but it's true. So that's rewarding, but I guess challenging would be remembering, like on the flip side, remembering that it's okay not to know everything. And that can be really hard, because you want to give your clients and, the best value for their money, because they're paying for your service. And sometimes, I feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm not, smart enough, or, just those ongoing self-doubts. That's kind of the hardest part, because there is so much to know. It's impossible to know it all. And that's okay, because that's the way it is. So I think for me personally, just sort of overcoming self-doubt and feeling, confident and competent has been one of the most challenging parts of the entire, journey of being a lawyer. But, it's great. I mean, I can't say enough about it. So again, we're all here to answer questions. I'm going to drop my email in again, because, I think the chat has gotten a little long, but yeah, so I know those sound kind of general and generic, but it's true. It's an ongoing daily challenge for at least me personally. So.
I mean, I agree with Megan on what she said. I think learning is a huge part of being a lawyer, and you never stop learning because your clients constantly have new issues. And so you are constantly like, oh, I never heard this before. Oh, I never heard this before. Oh, I never heard this before. Working for our office, one of the things that Candice mentioned is working for a legislator. I think that even LA County is designed a little differently. So I have worked on county ordinances, even though I'm not on the legislative team. And so I think working for a public law office does give you access to things that are a lot broader. I have worked on privacy issues. I have worked on public assistance issues. I've worked on legislation. I have worked on real estate matters. I've worked on homeless issues. I mean, it's like the range of things that you work on is so broad that you have to accept that you're not going to be the smartest one in the room or the person that has all the information. It's and you have to see where your comfort level is of, do you want to be the person that knows everything, or do you want to have access to all of these different things? And I think no matter what your answer is, is fine. Just knowing that. I do enjoy learning like Megan. So that is very rewarding for me, that every day I don't know what's going to land on my desk. Is it going to be a statue on Catalina Island? Is it going to be, because all the various issues like come to us, is it going to be surfers in Malibu? I mean, I just don't know what's going to end up on my desk. So that is enjoyable. And in the last session, I talked about a couple of the big cases that we worked on with our legal advocates resolving county policy issues, and that was rewarding as well. But so there's so much stuff that's rewarding. A challenge, I think that the biggest challenge is always our internal voices that are critical, that tell us that you can't do this, or you're not good enough, or so and so smarter, or so and so knows so much more. That has been the biggest challenge for me personally, because I was always shy. I would always be like, are you always this quiet? Are you always this quiet? And so that just shut me down even more. Until law school, one of the professors called me out and said, this is a safe space. If you don't start talking here, you're going to have a really hard time talking when you become a lawyer. And so I would say that has been the biggest challenge, because if you engage people, I think people are supportive, and it's how much you can believe yourself, and you can challenge those limiting beliefs that you have. And I certainly think that has been my biggest challenge.
I'll name one challenge, which I think impacts those kind of individual journeys that we take. And it's that the law is a really elitist space. It's very status obsessed. It's very ranking obsessed. I mean, my own experience has been with like the Ivy League. So it's obviously going to be an elitist space anyway, but even more so with law school. I just remember like my classmates were really into talking about their LSAT scores, their grades, what grades they got, their GPA when they got into law school, what grades they got in their class, what ranked law firm they were going to. It was like so weird, because I just felt like, God, who are you people? Why are you saying all these things out loud? Like, share them with your therapist or your journal or your family. But it's very normalized, I have to say. So I just want to name that, like, if it feels like an elitist space, it feels uncomfortable, that's because it is. And that is not cool about the law, but that's sort of just the way it is. And I would say that that dynamic in the law made it harder for me to come to the table as like a first gen college grad who didn't grow up with any lawyers and didn't know any lawyers in my life. So I often felt like I didn't belong, but that's normal, and it doesn't mean that you can't be a lawyer if that's what you want to do. I'm not going to say it's okay, because I don't think it's okay, because these spaces are elitist. But I just want to name that that's normal, and it's not you, it's the law. And if you want to go get your JD and become a lawyer, you can still do that despite the weird culture in law school.
Okay, so I think we have around 15 minutes remaining, if I'm not incorrect. So does anyone have any questions to ask at this moment? And I think they've all put their email. Oh, awesome, Nicole.
I have one question. I was wondering, because I am a Catholic, and I was watching a mass the other day. It's called the Red Mass, and it was for the anybody in the legal field, and it kind of gave a history of it's been like 800 centuries in that it's in the history, and I was wondering, are you guys part of any kind of society like that, and do you recommend it or not?
I am not part of any bar association or other similar group, in part because I went to law school, so a lot of my lawyers are friends. So I kind of feel like, and I'm also married to a lawyer, so I kind of feel like I'm very surrounded by lawyers, and I'm actually actively trying to diversify my friend group. But that being said, I have lots of friends who are parts of these types of groups, and they find it very rewarding because it's their way to find a community. And I said earlier, the law can be a really elitist place, and that means that it can be really isolating. And so it's really helpful to be able to find that community that's going to make you feel less isolated and less lonely. And for me in law school, that was the public interest, public sector students. There weren't that many of us. Most of my classmates were going to go work in a big law firm. So it was really critical for me to find those people who were also going to take a huge pay cut and live with job insecurity, but for work that we felt was meaningful and impactful. And it also helped with our morale, like down the road when it was like, oh, time to pay back our loans. How are we going to do this?
I hope this is answering the question. I'm a member of the California Lawyers Association, which has a bunch of different sections depending on what kind of law you practice or, are interested in. So I'm a member of the Environmental Law Association, which is good because it is sort of like a mentor, peer group where if a question comes through the door and somebody in my firm can't answer it, we have, 600 environmental lawyers throughout California who might be able to answer it. And it's really good so every year there's an annual meeting in Yosemite in the park. So we get together and we learn about, new things in environmental law that have happened and, new environmental justice programs that are available and movements toward, resolving historic inequities in environmental law, because boy, are there many. So that's one that I find a lot of value in is CLA. And I dropped a link in the chat. It was about an hour ago, but they have access for people who are law students, people who want to be law students. They have mentorship programs. So if you think you might even be kind of interested in a certain area of law, I would head to that website, and that might even give you ideas for other places to find similar programs. But it's a great resource, just tons of information, and people who are excited to help are there.
Yeah, and I'm not part of any associations, mostly because I think a lot of private folks in the private sector join those because it's a networking opportunity. And when you work for the government, you don't have to network really. which I'm not good at. So our association is the County Counsel Association, which we all are, all county councils across the state are part of, 58 counties. And so whenever we have novel issues of law, we get to talk to, I get to talk to the lawyers in Yuba County, Tulare County, across the state. And so that's our association. And we primarily use it when we have novel areas of law that we're exploring.
Okay, and I see a raised hand, so if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to kind of circle back to the whole elitist aspect in law in higher ed. That's something that I've been really trying to deconstruct in my undergrad and whatnot. And so I think that's also simultaneously my biggest fear going into law school. And so I want to kind of ask like how, individuals have been able to center themselves and, provide modes of support and, supportive circles that, don't revolve around that elitist framework, especially as like, certain aspects of law really benefit from doing so, especially depending on like, what work we do, who the clients are, et cetera.
I'm happy to start us off. I really experienced that when I went to USC as an undergrad, more than law school, because USC, at least at the time that I went there, was very much a school for more affluent folks, and I was there on financial aid up to here, and so and I don't know what help. Honestly, I don't know what helps, because I actually don't think I think I just survived it. It sounds like a lot of the, for Candice, what she shared about joining the public interest groups that helped to build a community. I'm of Persian descent, and most Persians that went to school there were also super affluent. I felt like I didn't belong in that group either. But I think that at least recognize it. I think what Candice said is true, that you just recognize it, that it's valid. And if you can have those communities, I think that certainly helps. While I was in law school, I was married. So I went to school like it was work, and I came home and I didn't really interact with anyone. So it was more like work for me. I went to work during the day while my husband went to work. And I know that's not super awesome, but that's kind of how it went for me.
I'll add that some of it is the law school that you choose to attend. Some law schools are better than others at engaging on their inclusivity or lack thereof. So especially when you've gotten in, but you haven't accepted, that's sort of like your point of maximal leverage, in the sense that they want you to come to their law school. So you can like ask every question you want to ask about what the law school is doing to diversify its student body, to make sure that the learning environment is inclusive, anything you're curious about. So some of it is, I think, the law school that you go to. And then one other, something else that helped me was actually like getting into the work. So law school really trains, at least at Columbia, it trains you to be a law professor, which like almost nobody is. It's like a tiny sliver of the pie. But there are lots of externship programs or clinics where you can actually start to practice law in a more like work-like setting. And that's when, for me, I found a lot of people who were interested in like the practice of law, as opposed to like, let's think about this case and identify the holding and the dicta and blah, 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 and other interesting theoretical legal questions. So that might be a place to like do the externship or do the clinic in the area of law that kind of excites you, to find your community, and to kind of like insulate yourself a little bit from like the crazy rank obsessed, like I need to make law review kind of people.
I would echo that. Most law schools, I think, have, enough programs where you can identify a group like, the Public Interest Law Foundation, or any number of groups that will have people who are, have similar values, goals, the people who want to do corporate law. Yeah, maybe they're doing moot court and law review, or, if you want to do an externship, I think Loyola had an Innocence Project, cancer rights, kind of healthcare clinic, and then public interest. I think there were like 3 others. Anyway, there are plenty of programs where you can go and find, and then, they'll have advisors, whether those are professors or people who are on staff at the school, to also assist and, make you feel like you're at a home instead of, an outsider on the way in or looking in,
Thank you.
Nicole, I think you had a question.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for being here. My name is Nicole Bryant. I'm the COO of the Civil Rights Department because I met Capri while I was actually in law school. So I just want to say, if anyone is interested in being a law clerk or intern, that's a program that we do have here. May is one of our amazing interns, but we do offer it for legal students as well. But I have my own question because, like I said, I worked for the county for a really long time, and I went to law school as a second career. So I worked in the chief executive office, I worked for sheriff, and now I'm pivoting. So it's one thing to pivot to civil rights, and then another thing, I'm waiting on my bar results, so wanting to pivot into to my legal career as well. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice or resources that you would recommend for someone when they're starting to practice, because I think LSAT is one thing. You need resources for LSAT. You need resources for law school. But what are the resources someone will use when they are beginning to practice?
My first sort of, the first thing that pops into my head is the California website, the calbar.gov. What is it? It's where we pay our money. But they have lots of resources in terms of, listing names of people who practice in certain areas, and you can identify those people. And then I would say, again, California Lawyers Association, there's bar associations within, like Los Angeles County Bar Association, so LACBA. There are women-focused law associations. There, you name it, there's a group, and that would be where that's where I would have started had I known. I know exactly how you feel. It's sort of just it's like you're floating in the Pacific on a raft, and you don't know which direction to go. It's overwhelming. But if you ask someone, I think 99% of people, not only will help, but want to help. So that's kind of where I'd start, I think.
Thank you.
Also law schools as well. Sometimes some are good, some aren't as good at, helping connect people with former alums. That's another really good resource. Worth a shot.
Candice or Parjack, did you have anything else to add to that?
I'm trying to think of resources if you're starting out. I mean, certainly groups like this, I feel like gives you, looks like you have at least 3 connections to start with. I think depending on what you're interested in, these days, everything is online. Like every organization has their careers page online. So I would start exploring those and see what you are drawn to and where you see yourself. And I think luckily you have so much information. It's just how do you narrow it? I think that becomes more of the issue. There's a wealth of information out there.
Yeah, plus one to everything that's been said. If this is related to like where to find a job, I can tell you that when I was last job searching, I talked to 130 people, 130 one-on-ones. and none of them knew me personally. So I was just astounded at how willing strangers were to talk to me. And yes, LinkedIn, I even like cold LinkedIn messaged people and they would still talk to me, which I found funny. People have also cold emailed me and I've never said no. So I agree with what Megan said. Like, I don't know what it is, but everyone's willing to talk. And maybe it's because we all like to hear our own voice.
We know we've been there. We know how hard it is.
Yes, I think maybe that's it. That's much more a generous interpretation.
Okay, so I think we have 1 minute left. Does anyone have any final questions? Okay, so if not, I was wondering what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, and if you were willing to share it with the audience.
Okay, I have a really easy answer to that question because I always repeat this piece of advice. When I was thinking of going to law school, a lawyer who worked for Senator Durbin with me said to me, if you're serious about going to law school and going into public interest and public sector work, I want you to ask yourself if you are emotionally prepared to be unemployed the day you graduate. Because I was headed to a law school where 90% of my classmates were going to go to a big law firm, which meant that they all knew at the start of their 3L year where they were going to work after law school. But if you do the public interest sector thing, like it's not predictable. So he just wanted to point out to me that I have to be able to live emotionally as well as financially with that unpredictability. And that was like the best piece of advice that anyone gave me about law school.
Megan or Parjack, did you have any?
I'm really racking my brain. It's Parjack, any? Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I think just showing up and doing the best that you can. I think that you know, the answers are not always there, and show up and do the best. And I think that and you know, be pleasant to work with.
and don't be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. Period. End of report. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you back in the main room. So hi, everybody. What's it called? We're gonna have a brief break because one of our speakers just went to go for a break really quick. She has to pay her parking meter, but she'll be back in like a minute or so. So we'll continue after that. But in the meanwhile, he's going to introduce this breakout room. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Breakout Room 3, Careers in Law. And again, this breakout room rotation is going to run for about 40 minutes. My name is May, and I'm going to be the staff assistant for this room. And so before we begin, just some reminders again, all of our speakers are going to present briefly, and then we'll open up conversation. And when we open up the conversation, feel free to turn your cameras and your microphones on to ask your question. We also encourage you to just turn on your videos just in general. You can also use a chat function to ask your question. And because this is a conversation, we really encourage you to speak directly with these amazing speakers. And when you're not speaking, please stay on mute so that everyone can hear. And lastly, we want to give all our speakers enough time to speak. And we also want to make sure that your questions get answered. And so this session is going to end at 12:50. And so once it reaches like around the 5-minute mark, we're going to get the broadcasting messages. And I highly encourage you guys to ask your questions by that time. And you can also reach out to the speakers offline as well. And so let's just wait a bit for Candice to come back and we'll get started. I can also start introducing the other speakers actually now that I think about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So first I want to introduce Meadows to you all. She is an environmental attorney at JF Novak, and she has been practicing environmental law in California for more than 15 years. She recognizes and values the need for creative and sustainable solutions that benefit both clients and the environment. And in the context of litigation and administrative matters, Ms. Meadows has worked extensively with many federal, state, and local government environmental relations and regulations, and has relished researching and advising on novel and unique questions on environmental law. She ran track at UNC Chapel Hill and was featured as a subject in the 2007 documentary, A Lawyer Walks into a Bar, which won the Grand Jury Prize at the South by Southwest Festival. Parjack Ghaderi is the LA County Counsel Chief Diversity Officer for the LA County Counsel's Office and is the first to be appointed to this position for the office. She is also an attorney representing the LA County Department of Beaches and Harbors, the LA Memorial Coliseum Commission, and the Regional Park and Open Space District. And she has over 15 years of legal experience representing various Los Angeles County departments, special districts, and commissions. And as a first-generation immigrant and first-generation attorney, she is passionate about encouraging traditionally underrepresented individuals to pursue careers in the legal field. And so, does anyone have any questions they want to kick us off with to Megan or Parjack? Okay, if not, I have one. I was wondering what your typical day looks like at your job and just kind of like a hour by hour, and maybe also like how many hours do you work, how you kind of navigate that kind of work-life balance.
I'll go ahead because I don't think I've gone first yet, right? Okay, so I think you'll probably hear this a lot, but no 2 days are the same. So our firm technically does litigation, which means, you know, a complaint is filed in a courtroom and then the ball starts rolling and then documents are exchanged. You go through the discovery process. So it really depends on what kind of matters we're handling at the time. So if we're in a litigation case that's active, that can involve reviewing documents that come from the other side. It can involve gathering documents from our client and sending them to the other side for review, identifying relevant evidence, drafting briefs to argue, you know, what issues are or should not be in front of the judge. Only once have we gone to trial, and I hope to never, ever do that again. I'm still traumatized. But typically we have smaller clients, kind of family businesses or individuals who have businesses. So we're either talking with them, getting information about what issues they have. We're talking with the government regulators, finding out where there's conflict and where we can find resolution. So it's a lot of getting information. That's what I spend my day doing a lot. And eventually that will turn into analyzing that information, determining what's relevant, and then coming up with what we hope is a solution. But as cases and matters unfold, sometimes you find there are 3 other things that hadn't been important at the beginning become important. So it's kind of an evolution. So I spend my days, not on the phone a lot. Like yesterday, I had a call with an attorney for the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and then a call with a client, and then also a call with one of the state agencies, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and then just doing my own research. So that's kind of a typical day, I would say, when we're not involved in an active litigation case. But yeah, every day is different. There's no formula, which is kind of what makes it exciting. Parjack, similar, different?
A little different. I mean, so I have 2 jobs. I think I've always had 2 jobs because I like punishment. So half my day I work as a lawyer, and half my day I work as as our office's chief diversity officer. It works out about that way. For my client, my main client is Beaches and Harbors. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the County of Los Angeles owns all of Marina del Rey. And so if you've been to Marina del Rey, it's kind of big. The county owns all the land and leases that land to developers. And so you have Trader Joe's and you have REI and you have all of those all of those developers that come in. And so half my day is spent on those types of issues. This lease on this property is about to expire, so the county and the lessee are negotiating. And so part of my day is that looking at these very boring, very old leases. And I have a bone to pick with these real estate lawyers that write 2-page long paragraphs. I can't read those, even though I'm a lawyer. So that's half of my day is advising them on those types of issues. And I will say the County of Los Angeles hires real estate lawyer experts. So even though I'm a lawyer in that department, I consult with attorneys who practice real estate for a billion years. And so I'll consult with them on those types of complex real estate issues. And I look at it from a municipality perspective. The other half of my day is a lot of meetings, talking about diversity, talking about, how do we make sure that our office is open to everyone who wants to join our office? For those that we have, how do we make sure they succeed in their careers? So I'm lucky because I get to do both of those things. There are days that I'm in back-to-back meetings all day long, and then there are days that I get to just work. And I think time management is a big deal because I know that May asked about how much we work. At the County of LA, I could probably work 12-hour days every day. I'd never be done with work. There's enough work that we can do that. I have 2 small children, so I don't want to do that. And I have to force myself to stop working and be a mom. So you have to be really disciplined, and you have to learn time management and prioritize and delegate. And so those are still learning things for me. Most days I try to work about 8 hours so that I can spend time with my kids too.
Thank you so much. And then Candice just came in. Candice is our third speaker, so I'm just gonna introduce her really quick. Candice is a managing director of policy and counsel of the AAPI Equity Alliance, where she leads the development of people-centered database policy for the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate. Candice has degrees from Harvard, Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, and Columbia Law School, and is admitted to practice law in California and New York. She lives in LA, where she serves as a mayoral appointee on the city's Human Relations Commission. And she is also the daughter of Korean immigrant parents and the first in her family to graduate from college and the first lawyer. So Candice, we were just talking about your day-to-day and what it looks like, as well as like kind of how you balance like your work as well as like other aspects of your life.
Hey everyone, thanks for that intro, May, and apologies for joining late. I had to go pay my parking meter. I just got my first LA parking ticket the other day, and I hope not to repeat that experience. So I've been like very vigilant about paying for parking. Okay, so my days are have sort of varied over time. So I've spent my whole career in policy work, which meant that before I was a lawyer, I was a legislative staffer for a US Senator. After I became a lawyer, I was a lawyer for the city of New York. Now I'm in the nonprofit side for the first time at AAPI Equity Alliance. We're a coalition of 40 community-based organizations who serve and represent the 1.5 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the LA County. We're also one of the co-founders of the National Coalition Stop AAPI Hate, which has collected over 11,000 stories of hate against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders from all 50 states since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I've always had a really meeting-heavy schedule. It's always been the case that I spend at least half of my time in meetings. And as I've gotten older and advanced in my career into now middle management, the American dream, that has only become more of the case where the meetings are now my work. In an average week, I would say I spend at least 20 hours a week in meetings. I still, though, again, middle management, have actual work to do outside of those meetings, and it can be a struggle to find time to get that done. especially because some of the work is like answering emails. When I was working for the city of New York, I would get over 200 emails a day, some of which actually needed to be responded to that day because my clients were people like the New York City mayor's office. So, you know, everything needed to have been done like yesterday. And some of the and then there's a whole other bucket of work that's not emails, that's like that actually requires like deep thinking and reading and researching. So I would say it is really varied by job. All of my jobs have been very fast paced, very meeting heavy, and sometimes you know, I try really hard to keep it to a 40-hour work week, but it is not. There have been times in my career where I've worked, where it's been more normal to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. So it really varies. And a lot of it, luckily today, a lot of it is on me. There's more flexibility, I would say, in the nonprofit world outside of the political context to set boundaries. I would also say there's a lot more flexibility at like a newer nonprofit. So the place where I am at has more of like a startup, is in more of a startup-y type of phase. So there's a lot of discretion for how I use my time.
Okay, awesome. And then, did you want to ask your question out loud, Marcel?
Yeah, I
Or we
can.
can, okay, awesome.
Okay. My question is, would you all say that it's easy to pivot into different areas or practices within the law field once you have your JD? Or is it while you're in law school, you're streamlined into one area?
I can go on that one. I think it is. You can pivot. So when I graduated, so my dad passed away when I was a second year. So that made my third year sort of like, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I only had one job offer and I didn't want to do that. So I took contract work, which was in intellectual property. Eventually those contract jobs end. And then I was literally, my job was to find a job. And it's really then the world opened up again. I landed at an environmental law firm. I loved it. So I stuck with that. And then about 6 years later, I decided I wanted to go into athletics administration and not practice law. So I did that for 2 years. And then I decided, actually, I do like practicing law. So I went back into environmental law. But at that point, I really could have, done a bunch of other types of law, just based on what I had learned between graduation, and getting back into law, if that kind of makes sense. So there's definitely room. You might discover, you're practicing one type of law and there's something, you meet somebody who's doing something else and you make that contact and you already have the skills. Law school will give you the skills to practice in any field. So it's a matter of your desire. If you want to start over in a new field, I say, yeah, I did it twice. So I say for sure, if you want to pivot, do it.
I agree with Megan. I think the realization that I'm coming to right now is, so I'm 41. And it just occurred to me the other day that I'm only halfway through my working life. Like, even though I've been an adult for say 20 years, I'm going to be working for at least 20 to 25 years. And generationally, I know that I'm not a boomer. I'm not going to spend my whole life in one job, in one career. That's just not the way the economy works anymore. So I think generationally, pivoting is going to happen. It has to happen. It's necessary in today's economy and workforce. And it is more acceptable now. I'll also add that the co-panelists have heard me talk a lot about how elitist the law can be, which can be a very like alienating and lonely thing for those of us who are like, I am the first lawyer in my family. I'm the first college graduate in my family. I didn't grow up around lawyers. I often felt a certain kind of way about being in these elitist spaces. The flip side of that, though, is that a JD is very prestigious, that being a lawyer carries some sort of cachet. Whether that should be the case or not is another question, but it does mean that it's easier to pivot, I think, with the JD. For some reason, it gives you like some amount of credibility, when really the credibility that I think it gives most of us is that we borrowed a lot of money to go to school, more money than most people. So you will meet a lot of lawyers turned fill in the blank in the world, like lawyer turned baker, lawyer turned like anything, lawyer turned doctor, lawyer turned construction worker. It just happens because a lot of people tend to leave the law, and then some people come back. And I think some of it is the prestige that it gets attached to a law degree. And so that makes it kind of easier to pivot too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Megan and Candice. And I think anyone that has practiced law has questioned whether that was the right decision or not. I have never met a lawyer that was like, yep, roses and sunshine every day. So I think that's very typical of whatever career path, but all the lawyers I've ever spoken to have said, and even, my friends say, I'm not sure if I'm going to tell my kids to go to law school. I personally think it does open up a lot of doors for you. And my primary experience has been in the County of Los Angeles. That's where I spent, most of my time. And I have seen my colleagues go become directors of departments. If you look at the LA County, the county CEO was a lawyer in the county counsel's office, and now she is the CEO of the County of Los Angeles with a $40 billion budget. Her chief deputy, her second in command, was also a lawyer in our office. And then, of course, the council member Picorian. So it does, you do pivot and you do change. And I think that is part of being a lawyer. And I don't know that it matters whether you do it straight out of law school or if you do it later. I think those skills that you learn through law school. And I think that the main thing I think that I took away from law school, and more actually the bar exam, is the ability to sit down and concentrate and work on something until getting to pass the bar exam, I think is something that you learn a lot from, that it just makes you resilient, I think, going through that process. And so I think pivoting makes absolute sense. I like Megan, left and became an executive at a department. And I was like, man, I miss being a lawyer, where I just had one job and now not 47 jobs. So, and I think you can always come back. And that's the great thing. Like, I think if you have that JD, you always have options. So I actually think it is a good career choice. And that's someone who, court terrified me, litigation terrified me. But I have colleagues who just feel like they're on stage when they're litigating. And I watch them, I'm like, wow, you are definitely a litigator, because you see them and they are meant to be where they are because they are on a stage and they are performing for you in while advocating for your rights. And then there's those of us, who really like to be in the public sector. We want to move things forward. We want to make things better for others. And then there's those that want to make money and they want to be at the firm, at the high-rise buildings. And I think it's all fine. It's just, where do you see yourself, and where do you want to be?
Does anyone have any other questions? Awesome, go ahead, Nina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday here. I apologize that I'm off camera. I'm snacking and I didn't want to be rude. But my question is, I know that I want to pursue a JD, but the thing is, I'm also very passionate about public policy. And I know that in law school, it's not a space where it's necessarily teaching you how you could change the laws. It's more so teaching you what is the law. I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on pursuing joint degree programs at the same time, or finishing your JD and then going back for whatever the other degree that you're passionate about. And specifically for public policy, is it still possible to be in those rooms to change the law with just a JD? Or do you need a master's in public policy as well? And the reason why I do want to keep the JD is just because Something that I have accepted, not only like in this space, but just throughout, is a JD comes with bragging rights, I guess is a nice way to say it, and unfortunately that's just the way the world is. So I know that having a JD would hold a lot, would have more weight, I guess. But in terms of public policy, should I just keep the JD? Should I do a joint degree? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I can jump in because I have a lot of strong opinions here. So Mina, thanks so much for your question. I'm a policy wonk and nerd. So this is like I'm very excited for you, and I'm excited for the policy world to have you. I guess the first point I would make is that you definitely don't have to have a JD to do policy work and to do it at a really rarefied level. I started my career working for the second highest ranking Democrat in the US Senate, and I had no credentials. Some of my friends who have no JD have gone on to work in the White House. So you don't on policy. So you definitely don't need a JD to do policy work. Number two is if you do get a JD, it is helpful for policy work. I have found in my time that having a JD has made me a stronger policymaker in two ways. One is that I'm much better with language. I've written a lot of bills and laws for New York City and now for California State Legislature and in my current role. And being a lawyer means that I can write what I want to write. If I want to write a bill that makes public transit safer for Asian Americans and other communities of color who experience verbal harassment, I know how to do that. And I know how to do it without creating unintended consequences. It also makes me a much better problem solver because working at the local level or the state level means that I have to be mindful of legal issues because cities and counties can only do what they're allowed to do under state law. States and cities and counties all are bound by federal law. So I can just be much more creative as a problem solver with the JD because I'm aware of like constitutional issues. Like I remember what the Dormant Commerce Clause is. The third point I'll make is you definitely do not need to get an MPP. I got an MPP. I don't think it was a good use of my time. The reason why I did it was because I wanted to work in Congress, but I had no connections. So I thought that if I went to graduate school in DC, my professional degree would network me. So it would give me the connections. It actually did work out that way. I went to Georgetown because they gave me a full ride. And then I ended up interning for Ted Kennedy. And it was through that internship that I met a staffer for Senator Durbin, who helped to like elevate my application, my job application in the stack. But that is not, but I would say that is the only thing I got out of public policy school because the best way to learn how to do policy work is by working. There's like no substitute for that. And I would say the most valuable thing about a policy degree is the extent to which it gives you a professional network in which to do the work. So one thing I mentioned in a previous breakout room is that if you're interested in policy work, I think the best work experience is going to work for a legislative body because you will actually learn how policy is made, at least like when it comes to bills and budgets. And it can be hard to get your foot in the door, but once you're in, it can be very easy to move around and move up because legislative staff tends to turn over very quickly. So not only will you be learning like how the sausage is actually made, but you'll also be able to move up within a year or two and to a point where you like have actual like, discretion and authority to do stuff. So that I guess that's my spiel on policy and the law.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so I was wondering what things or like clubs, maybe clinics or like externships or anything like that that you did in law school that kind of helped you prepare for your practice today.
can go. So I knew from day one that I did not want to be in a courtroom. I didn't want to be taking depositions. I didn't want to be, I know it might sound silly, but I didn't want to be arguing with people. And I know that's the assumption. You go to law school because you're going to argue, but it's not necessarily the case. And if it is, you can do it on paper sometimes, it doesn't have to be a boxing match, literally. So what I did was I said, okay, I know I'm not going to do moot court, and I didn't know any lawyers before law school, so I didn't even know what moot court was. So it's basically you go and you act out a courtroom. There's a judge, you represent, you are a lawyer representing your client, and you're able to have that, like we were talking about earlier, being on stage. Some people are just born to do that. And when I do that, I black out. So that's not great. So I know that I was going to be a research writer kind of lawyer. So I did law review. And there were a few different law reviews at my school. I ended up on entertainment law review, which I thought was kind of interesting because copyright's interesting, but I certainly didn't end up doing any of that, but it was a great experience. And then I also joined the Public Interest Law Foundation, which did really interesting, meaningful work. I externed at another clinic on campus, and Loyola was really a great school because they are a Jesuit school, which again, this was new to me, but the focus is on social justice. So you're required to do public interest work as part of your, requirement as a student. To graduate, you have to have a certain number of hours where you volunteer. So I did a volunteer income tax association program, which numbers also make me black out. But I was able to actually, be of some help, which felt great. And I'm trying to think I feel like there was another program, but those were sort of the, find your people, join the groups, inquire, your school have a number of either like a moot court, a law review, and then externships, and then opportunities for volunteering off campus. But that's the route I took because I knew from day one that I wasn't going to be needing the skills to be in a courtroom. So I went the other direction. Hope that answered the question.
I'm also a huge fan of externships. It's like a try before you buy. It's a really easy and safe way for you to try on different legal careers before deciding what you want to do after law school. So when I was in law school, I did 3 externships. I externed for a public defender. I externed for the Department of Justice, and then in the criminal division on the prosecution side. And then I externed for the New York City Law Department, which is like the LA County Counsel, but for New York City. And that's how I knew I didn't want to do criminal law, and how I learned that the New York City Law Department was the perfect place for me. Like that was a place where I could take my JD and do policy work, and I ended up writing and working on many, if not all, of the sanctuary city policies that the city enacted during the Trump administration to protect immigrant New Yorkers, because that's a really specialized shop who advises the city council and the mayor's office and city agencies and writes bills and laws. But I wouldn't have known that unless I did this externship, which put me in the office 10 hours a week and helped me understand what the work was, but also helped me understand like who was doing the work. And I realized I just like love the kind of people who are working there. So big fan of externships, highly recommend that you do at least one, if not multiple ones in law school. They're also a really good way to find your people in terms of people who actually want to practice law, versus like, I don't know, talk about law review and rankings.
I don't have a lot to add to Candice and Megan on this point because I actually didn't do a whole lot while I was in law school other than go to law school. But I did put in the chat the California State Bar Diversity Report. I encourage you guys to take a look at that because it shows you like not only the breakup of California attorneys, but also job satisfaction And I will say, I think the nonprofit world is supposedly the place where people have the highest job satisfaction. So, followed by those in government. I mean, so just if you're interested, it's kind of good to see where the state bar is on some of these issues. So if you have a few minutes, take a look at that report card.
Yeah, awesome. Did anyone else have any other questions? We do have, I think, 10 minutes remaining. So if you have questions, just type them in the chat, unmute, or anything like that. I think one thing that I'm really curious about is something that keeps coming up for me when I think about law and like going to law school and everything is that, you know, I think the law has been used to not only like dismantle a lot of like structural like inequalities and oppression, but also at the same time reinforce it. So I was wondering kind of like, how do you navigate like that dualism in law, especially in your careers? And kind of like, how do you come to a reckoning with it?
I love your question, May, because I think about this all the time, like a lot. I think that the law it's just a tool. And as a tool, it can be wielded by anyone to do anything. We've seen, for example, the way that the Supreme Court has previously used the law to say that segregation is the law of the land and separate is equal. And then 50 years later said the opposite, that actually the law tells us that separate is not equal. We've seen the current Supreme Court say that the law protects our right, a woman or a woman identifying person's right to an abortion. And now we've seen the current Supreme Court say the opposite. So really it depends on who has the power to wield that tool. And that's why I get very excited about talking to people who want to go into the law to close the gap between the law as a tool and justice as a desired outcome. And I think the law can be, there are so many ways to do systems change, to do policy change. You could be a community organizer, you could do advocacy work, you can be a lawyer, you can be a policymaker without a JD. And I think we should think about the law as like another tool in that toolbox, another approach to systems change. And because I'm a policy person, because I've worked in the political context for basically all of my career, most of my career, I also think it's about power. Who has power? And unfortunately, it is the case that for too long, like people who look like, you know, us in the room are not the ones who get power or have power. And so that's why I'm very excited that Law Day is happening, that there are people in this room who don't look like the traditional quote unquote lawyer, usually like white, straight male, cisgendered. And, you know, law school's really expensive, and public interest in public sector work doesn't pay as much as say working at a firm. So it is like a decision that's, you know, should be thought about and has to be made carefully. A really good piece of advice someone gave me was figure out what your monthly loan repayment will be as soon as you graduate from law school, and then think about making that payment for 10 to 20 years before you decide to take out those loans. But all of that being said, that's why I'm excited that you're all in this room because I think we need more and diverse people in the law who can use that tool to close the gap between law and justice.
I agree. It can be difficult to live, you know, knowing that the laws, you know, aren't always working for good. They're sometimes working for evil. And it can be really frustrating. But what personally, what helps is, you know, participating in events like these and seeing that the rooms are going to look different. And that's going to represent the people who, you know, historically haven't had the power and are going to take it back through law, because that's how it's done. And so, yeah, like shifting what the power structure looks like is the way to do it, and seeing it happen, like we're seeing it happen, which kind of motivates me and makes me feel okay, even though, yes, you know, currently things seem to be slipping backwards, but temporarily, you have to hope that the people who are here and want to do good end up in the room. And I believe it's going to happen because, that's what we're seeing slowly but surely. So, but it's difficult. It can be difficult to reconcile, working within this structure that has defended the powerful and the people with power, and just watching change happen so slowly. But, we're here for the right reason. So it's just about, for me, keeping optimism above cynicism, I guess. Just being optimistic and working with people who want to do the right thing, and continuing to build that network. So as much as networking is about, learning your craft and whatever, it's also about developing relationships with people who identify in the same, who want the same, who want to achieve the same goals of, justice and equity, and building those people up.
Yeah. Thank you, May. That is a great question. I echo what Candice and Megan said. And for me personally, working for the county, I do feel like I am on the justice side of the law. And I, with the diversity work that I do track what's going on in the broader legal profession. So frustrated that Morrison and Forrester, they were trying to do good work by having this externship for students of color, and there's a group that's challenging that. And so what I try to do on my end is counterbalance that with our internships and try to say our internships are for everyone, and we outreach to people to pull them in and to try to counterbalance. I don't know what the motivation is to not have a person of color really go to Morrison and Forrester. I don't know what happened, what those conversations are there. I cannot comprehend them. But what I can do is be on the other side, on the county, and say for our internship, we want to make sure that people that come in value diversity, value inclusion, value justice. And so I think for every one of those voices where I'm not sure what they're thinking about, I actually think there's 5 of us on the other side thinking that no, that law should be used to better the lives of all of us. And I totally agree with Megan and Candice. They are so thoughtful in their answers, and I'm actually learning so much from you all. So thank you for the questions.
So we have 1 minute left, but we do have a final question in the chat. Is there any policy internships or volunteer opportunities to understand it better and learn from it without being in the legislative body? So maybe Candice or anyone else wants to touch upon that.
Yes, actually, AAPI Equity Alliance is looking for an intern, and Stop AAPI Hate is hiring for our first DC lobbyist and a policy manager. So if you have any questions about those opportunities, feel free to reach out to me, and I will put my email address in the chat. There's also a really great page on the Los Angeles Forward website on jobs and internships for progressive people. So feel free to, you should check out that resource. It's pretty long.
Yeah, and I'll just plug County Counsel because we do have, although not all of our work is legislative, we edit, the county is a legislative, the Board of Supervisors is a legislative body. So you can see what that work is like through an internship with our office too.
And if anybody's interested in environmental law, I will drop my email.
Okay, awesome. And it seems like we haven't been called back yet. So if anyone has a last bit of advice or any tips that you guys want to share with the audience, that would also be amazing. Oh, awesome. Marcel?
Hi, yes, this one is more about your guys' law school experience. I was just wondering, while you guys were at law school, did you feel as though your respective schools supported you? Did you feel supported while you were studying there? Or did you feel as though you were more on your own?
I found mine supportive, which kind of surprised me because I'd never gone to a private school. And it was lovely, and I made very good friends, and the professors were always available and, happy to have conversations and take time.
Awesome. And we'll see you back in